intuiting what you want, but also intuiting what others want. Okay, I don't know if the video got cut off, but yeah, so intuition is both kind of getting in touch. It's getting in touch with will in general. I think that's the abstract thing about it. It's not just getting in touch with your gut feelings. It's getting in touch with, I think that this is the vibe in the room. I think that this person wants this. I think that this person doesn't want that. So yeah, it's sort of getting in touch with an abstract sense of will, becoming maybe aware by reading the material world, by interpreting the patterns between, you know, this person's face next to this other person's face, next to it being a very grey day, and my kind of memory of what happened yesterday, and all these things, it being sort of a way in which you read patterns to get acquainted with will as an abstract concept, the will of anyone, of any being. It's weird because this opens a lot of other questions, because it could suggest that precognition could be linked to telepathy in some sense, in that it's about, again, like Terence McKenna would say, seeing what you mean, right? Getting in touch with what another person's will or what another person's self-expression is, before that self-expression has even expressed itself materially. Or maybe another way of looking at it is that self-expression is always expressed materially. Again, it's this thing about the alchemical kind of layers of an onion, of distillation, that's sort of what intuition is at some level, isn't it? Because someone can say, I'm happy, and they can, at no point do they say, I am not happy. But body language, context, all sorts of other materializations can lead you to have the intuition that actually, I get the feeling that this person isn't happy. So all those things, it's not like intuition is reaching into some ethereal, non-material realm and getting information from there. It's all about the material world. It's all about duality, right? I think that again, spirit is about, I think, the connections between objects, and therefore the material world, including thoughts as material in some sense, as things that are manifested for you, for example. Even though other people can't see your thoughts, they're still things that are manifested, that they are in the realm of form. So, yeah, intuition is always about, like, you can read signs at varying degrees of depth. You know, there can be people that you don't know how to read, so maybe they are feeling something inside that is very clear for other people, but you can't read it. Potentially, it could be because that is traumatic to you, that there is something about their state that you don't want to see because it triggers something in you, right? There are many cases of this where people kind of seem to be blind to very obvious things that everyone in their family sees, because it's their psychological blind spot, is something that is very repressed even in them, despite it having to do with someone else, an acquaintance. So, yeah, there are varying degrees, I think, of this, where perhaps that's sort of what precognition in the paranormal sense of the word is, and therefore what synchronicity kind of is or points to as well. it's reading body language. It's just that instead of it being the body language of a person, it's the body language of all kinds of objects. You're reading the body language of a big network of objects. Again, objects sort of decorating the streets, trees, the clouds, events, and from reading this body language, you get the feeling, again in this telepathy sort of way, that you see what it means. You see that, there seems to be something that wants to express itself, right? In the same way that that sad person wasn't fully expressing that they were sad, but they couldn't avoid expressing it in everything that they did. At some bigger level, maybe they couldn't avoid expressing it even at a completely unconscious level, in the sense that maybe everything that was happening to them expressed this. And this is somehow what synchronicity and divination maybe point to, that maybe even the events that are happening to them, that they don't have any control over, symbolically express what is inside them, right? And so, you can, read something is wanting to express itself, and then at this bigger level, in this sort of synchronicity sense, maybe you can read that, something is wanting to express itself based on body language. Based on this micro body language, it seems that something is wanting to happen. And maybe that's sort of what precognition is as well. It's reading the environment in a very subtle way, in a way that the ego is not really doing, right? It's kind of allowing a less egoic, less conscious part of yourself be involved in the reading process. Not just limited to your ego, but kind of read with your entire self. And therefore there will be things that are too detailed for the ego to really kind of hold in awareness, but that you will get a gut feeling about. And maybe you won't be able to express this gut feeling in language or in egoic senses because, because it's a reading that's too detailed, that involves too many variables. In a sense, variables are maybe possibly an egoic concept to begin with. It could be that at some non-dual level, reading the environment is a more organic thing, where it's not so much about, this symbol and this symbol and this thing and this sign and this sign and this sign, and they're all being constellated, but maybe at a deeper level of the self, the environment, you interact with the environment in a very fluid way, which therefore kind of the ego struggles to map out. And mapping it out, I think, is another important topic that, Terence McKenna talks about this a lot, how mapping out time is a very important thing. And for a long time, I always got the feeling that, mapping out time seems like a dangerous or boring thing to do, depending on how you look at it. Because the stories that always come to mind are the classic stories of, kind of fairy tales of people asking a genie to tell them their future, and then once they know their future, they can't live. Maybe because it's too scary to know your future, or because it makes life too boring to know your future. So I always had the feeling that, well, maybe it's best to not have a map of the future. But I see now that having a map of time, as Terence McKenna talks about, has nothing to do, in my opinion, with knowing what's going to happen to you and kind of living that life like a robot. Because that is a one-sided, it's one side of the picture. That's not, that only works as a metaphor. I think that in a non-dual sense, which also, probably only works as a metaphor, to use that word, but in a non-dual sense, there is an interplay between chaos and meaning. There isn't, I think, a sort of strict plan for the future. But at the same time, there isn't pure chaos. And there is some kind of interplay where you're reading the environment in this way. And that mapping out time is actually, again, an essential part of material existence itself. That it's not that we should do it or that we shouldn't do it. Maybe the question is that we already do. That it's inevitable to map out time. That maybe what we call the future and the past are maps of time. Our expectations, our intuitions are maps of time. We already have this. So maybe the question is whether we want to, let's say, do it well or use it well or not, whatever that means to every individual, right? Not in some sort of global moral sense, but maybe that to you, in your own way, maybe there are times in life where, I wish I would have been more perceptive and had a bit more intuition to read the situation, right? Because you always think, oh, I made a bad decision. I made a bad decision in this point of my life. And if I had been a little more sort of receptive to signs, not in a spiritual sense, again, just like reading body language, being more sort of awake, aware of what other people are trying to say and so on, that maybe that's in your personal sense of morality, that would be a better way, a more sort of a better form of intuition. In the same way that you can learn to juggle and you can, do it better or worse, depending on how much you practice, that maybe we can practice our intuition, that it's not a question of obtaining precognitive abilities. Maybe it's sort of inherent to space and time, and the way space and time is ordered, structured around a self, around an ego. Yes, self more as ego in this case, that maybe it's the way that is already laid out that already implies both a map of space, we see space and we can map it out beyond what we're aware of at the moment, and we can have intuitions about space and time, have intuitions about time. The only reason why intuitions about time seem more spooky in our culture is probably because as a culture, we seem to have focused a lot on space, right? We've studied molecules and biology and atoms. We've really focused in on matter, on space. And so I think that because time is kind of the repressed aspect of our culture, anything having to do with it is taboo and therefore obscene and therefore occult, therefore kind of scary and, woo. But that we have a map of time and a map of space. So we already are using them both. So maybe the question is to you in your own way to use them both as best as you can in your own way and to your own goals, kind of thing, Again, to make the kind of decisions that you would like to make, that are aligned with your will in some way. Anyway, my battery is running out. So yes, thanks for listening and goodbye.